She stood at the altar in white silk, surrounded by London's finest, waiting for a man who would never come. The whispers started before the priest could finish his prayer. By nightfall, Clara Whitmore's name would be poison in every drawing room from Mayfair to Westminster. But here's what none of them knew yet. The woman they pitied, the bride they mocked, the scandal they'd feast on for months. She wasn't broken. She was just beginning, and before this story ends, every single person in that church would remember the day they underestimated her. Stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city. And if you want to see how she turned shame into power, hit that like button now. The morning of her wedding, Clara Whitmore woke to rain. Not the gentle English drizzle that pattered politely against window panes, but the kind of downpour that hammered the streets of London into rivers of mud and horse manure, that turned silk umbrellas inside out and sent servants scrambling to protect the carpets. Her lady's maid, Margaret, had called it an omen. "Bad luck, miss. Rain on your wedding day." Clara had laughed then, sitting before her vanity in her dressing gown, watching Margaret's nervous hands fumble with the pearl pins. "Don't be superstitious, Meg. It's just water." Now standing in the vestibule of St. George's Church, Hanover Square, with 300 of London's aristocratic elite seated in the pews beyond those heavy oak doors, Clara thought maybe Margaret had been right after all. "He'll be here," her father said for the fourth time, though his voice had gone thin. Lord Edmund Whitmore was a man who commanded shipping empires and parliamentary votes, but he couldn't command his daughter's bridegroom to show up on time. The traffic from his club, perhaps. The rain. "It's been 40 minutes, Father." "I'm aware." Through the crack in the door, Clara could see them, row after row of feathered hats and tailored morning coats, faces she'd known since childhood, now turning toward each other with barely concealed delight. The Ashford sisters in the third row, heads bent together like conspirators. Lord Pemberton checking his pocket watch with theatrical precision. Lady Hartwell fanning herself despite the church's chill, her eyes bright with the promise of fresh gossip. Clara's wedding gown was a masterpiece. French silk with Brussels lace, seed pearls sewn by hand over 6 months, a train that required 2 attendants to carry. It cost more than most families earned in a year. Right now it felt like a costume for a play that had already closed. "Miss Clara." The priest appeared at her elbow, his face carefully neutral in the way of men paid to witness other people's disasters. "Perhaps we should consider—" "5 more minutes," her father interrupted. "My lord, the guests are beginning to—" "5 more minutes." The priest retreated with a small bow that managed to convey both deference and pity. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the silk of her skirt, felt the stiff fabric resist, felt the boning of her corset dig into her ribs with each shallow breath. Somewhere in the church, someone coughed. Someone else laughed. Quickly stifled, but she heard it. She had known Thomas Crawford for 3 years, loved him for 2. Accepted his proposal 6 months ago in her father's garden, with the roses in bloom and the future spread before them like a gilded road. He'd been charming, witty, the second son of an earl with political ambitions, and a smile that made her forget every warning her mother had whispered before she died. "Men like that," her mother had said on her deathbed, her hand cold in Clara's, "they're all performance. Watch what they do when no one's applauding." Clara had thought she'd been watching. Apparently she'd been watching the wrong things. "My lord!" A footman burst through the side door, rain-soaked and breathing hard. "A message from Mr. Crawford's man." Her father snatched the envelope, broke the seal with his thumb. Clara watched his face go from red to white to something beyond color entirely. His hands, those powerful hands that had built fortunes and crushed competitors, began to shake. "What does it say?" Clara heard herself ask, though part of her already knew, had known perhaps since she woke to the rain. "He's—" her father's voice cracked, started again. "He sends his regrets. He finds he cannot— he does not wish to— Let me see it. Clara, let me see it." He handed it over. The paper was expensive, Thomas's family crest embossed at the top. The handwriting was his secretary's, but the signature was his own. She'd seen it on enough love letters to recognize the flourish. "Miss Whitmore, I find upon reflection that I am not prepared to undertake the responsibilities of marriage at this time. I have departed for the continent and do not expect to return for the foreseeable future. I trust you will understand and wish you well in your future endeavors. T. Crawford. Future endeavors. The laugh that came out of Clara's mouth didn't sound like her. It sounded like glass breaking. We'll say he took ill, her father said quickly. Sudden fever. We'll postpone, set a new date. He's gone to the continent, father. He's not coming back. Then we'll say you changed your mind. Cold feet. Happens all the time with young brides. They're not going to believe that. Clara looked at this door, at the shadows moving behind it, at the murmur of 300 voices rising like a tide. They're going to know exactly what happened. And she was right. The moment her father opened those doors and made the announcement, voice steady, words carefully chosen, lies layered over truth like paint over rot, she watched the realization ripple through the church like wind through wheat. Shock first, eyes widening, hands flying to mouths. Then the whispers spreading faster than fire, each person turning to their neighbor to confirm what they'd just heard. Then, worse than the whispers, the looks. Pity from the women who'd never liked her. Satisfaction from the ones who had. Embarrassment from the few who'd called themselves friends. And from the men, calculation. A young woman jilted at the altar was damaged goods, but depending on her dowry and her father's connections, she might still be worth considering. For the right price. Clara walked down that aisle in her wedding gown with her father's arm locked in hers like an iron bar, and she kept her head up, kept her face blank, kept her eyes forward. It was the longest walk of her life. Behind her, she heard Lady Hartwell's stage whisper, "Well, I always said there was something odd about her." Someone else. Poor thing, she must be devastated. Another voice, male, amused. Crawford always was smarter than he looked. Her father's arm tensed. "Don't," Clara whispered. "Don't give them more." The rain had stopped by the time they reached the carriage. Of course it had. The sun was breaking through the clouds, turning puddles into mirrors, making everything sparkle like the world was mocking her. At home, her father retreated to his study with a bottle of whiskey and orders not to be disturbed. The servants moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding her eyes, dismantling the wedding breakfast that would never be eaten. Margaret helped her out of the dress with shaking hands and tears streaming down her face. "Don't cry," Clara told her. "I'm not." It was true. She sat in her chemise and stockings, watching Margaret fold the silk with the kind of reverence reserved for burial shrouds, and she felt nothing. No tears, no rage, just a vast, empty coldness spreading from her chest outward, freezing everything it touched. "What will you do, miss?" Margaret whispered. Clara didn't answer because she didn't know. The next morning, the papers arrived. Her father's footman brought them to the breakfast room on a silver tray, his face carefully blank. Clara was alone. Her father had left before dawn for his offices, unable to face her across the table, and she almost told the footman to take them away. But you couldn't hide from a scandal. You could only choose how you met it. The Times was restrained. Wedding postponed indefinitely due to groom's sudden departure. Reading between the lines was easy enough. The Morning Chronicle was less subtle. Crawford Eyre calls off wedding hours before ceremony. But it was the scandal sheets, the penny dreadfuls her mother would never have allowed in the house, that told the real story. Jilted at the altar, Whitmore heiress left waiting while groom flees to France. What did Miss W. do to send her intended running? Sources say, the sources, of course, were invented. But that didn't matter. The story was out there now, growing with each retelling, mutating into something worse with each iteration. By the end of the week, she'd heard versions where she was barren, or mad, or carrying another man's child, where she'd demanded impossibilities, where she'd revealed some terrible secret at the last moment, where she was a shrew, a bore, a woman so fundamentally unlovable that even a man who'd courted her for 3 years had chosen exile over marrying her. None of it was true. All of it stuck. The invitations stopped first, the ones that had been arriving daily, for teas, for dinners, for musicales and gallery openings and rides in Hyde Park, dried up like a river in drought. Then came the cut direct. Women she'd known since childhood crossing the street to avoid her, eyes sliding past her like she was invisible, conversations dying the moment she entered a room. Her father's business partners started finding excuses to meet elsewhere. The House of Commons colleagues who used to fill their drawing room discovered prior commitments. Even the servants began to whisper, and Clara would catch them looking at her with that particular mix of pity and superiority that domestic staff reserve for fallen aristocrats. "You should go to the country," her father said 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't. They were in his study, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun, him at his desk surrounded by shipping manifests and untouched correspondence. "To your aunt in Derbyshire. Let the scandals settle. Come back next season when they've found someone else to talk about." "Run away, you mean?" "Be practical, Clara." He looked old suddenly, the lines around his mouth carved deep. "The longer you stay, the worse it gets. They're calling you—" He stopped. "What are they calling me?" "It doesn't matter." "Tell me." "The abandoned bride." He said it quietly, like the words themselves could wound. "They've started taking bets at the clubs, on whether you'll ever marry, on how much I'll have to increase your dowry to make you acceptable, on—" His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I should have vetted him better, should have seen— This isn't your fault." Clara moved to the window, pulled back the curtain an inch. Across the square, she could see Lady Pemberton's house, could see the carriages arriving for her weekly salon. An event Clara used to attend, an event where she was no doubt the primary topic of conversation right now. "He fooled both of us. That doesn't help you." "No." She let the curtain fall. "It doesn't." That night, alone in her room, Clara finally let herself think about Thomas. Really think about him, beyond the anger and humiliation and betrayal. She thought about the way he used to look at her across crowded ballrooms, like she was the only person in the room. The way his hand felt in hers during their first dance. The promises he'd made in her father's garden. His voice rough with emotion that had seemed so genuine. Had any of it been real? Or had she just been a convenience, a suitable match, a stepping stone to whatever he actually wanted? And when had he decided she wasn't worth it? Days before the wedding, weeks. Had he known when he kissed her goodbye the night before, his lips warm against her temple, his whispered, "Tomorrow," a lie already formed? She'd thought she knew him, thought she understood the man beneath the charm. But maybe there was no depth to understand. Maybe the performance was all there was. The knock on her door came just after midnight. "Miss Clara?" Margaret's voice, uncertain. "There's a gentleman downstairs, says he needs to speak with you." "At this hour? Tell him to call tomorrow." "He says it's about Mr. Crawford, miss. Says it's urgent." Clara wrapped herself in a dressing gown and descended the stairs to find a man she'd never seen before standing in her father's entrance hall. He was young, well-dressed, nervous. Not a servant, not quite a gentleman. "Miss Whitmore. Forgive the intrusion." He twisted his hat in his hands. "My name is Peter Wright. I was Thomas Crawford's secretary." "Was?" "He's dismissed me, miss. 2 days ago, by letter from Paris." Wright's face was pale, angry. "After 8 years of service, not even the courtesy of meeting me in person." "I'm sorry for your troubles, Mr. Wright, but I don't see what this has to do with— He owes me 3 months' wages. And before you say that's not your concern, I should tell you that he owes half of London. Tailors, wine merchants, his club, his landlord. He left a trail of debts from here to Dover." Wright's hands tightened on his hat. "The wedding, Miss Whitmore. It was never about you. It was about your dowry. He needed that money to cover what he'd borrowed. And when he realized your father was too careful to release the funds before the ceremony, he panicked and ran." The words hung in the air like smoke. "You're lying." "I wish I was." Wright pulled a stack of papers from his coat. "These are copies. His accounts, his debts, his correspondence with creditors. I made them before he could destroy the evidence. I thought you should know the truth, that it wasn't—" He swallowed. "That you weren't the problem." Clara took the papers with numb hands, scanned the numbers, the desperate letters, the pattern of borrowing and spending that went back years. Gambling debts, mostly. Horses, cards, dice. Thomas had always been so careful around her, so moderate in his habits. She'd never seen this side of him. "Why show me this?" she asked. "Because he ruined you to save himself. And because—" Wright's voice dropped. "Because I have a sister, miss. And if someone did this to her, I'd want her to know it wasn't her fault." After he left, Clara sat in the darkened drawing room with the papers spread across her lap, watching the numbers blur and refocus as the candles burned down. She should feel vindicated, perhaps. It wasn't about her, wasn't personal, just money, just a man's cowardice in the face of his own failures. But somehow that made it worse. He'd looked her in the eye and lied, had kissed her and planned his escape, had let her stand in that church, in that dress, in front of everyone she knew, and become a joke. Not because she'd done something wrong, not because there was something unlovable about her, but because it was easier than facing his creditors. She was collateral damage, an inconvenience, a problem solved by running away. The rage, when it finally came, was cold and clear and absolute. The next morning, Clara stood before her wardrobe and chose a dress. Not mourning black, she wasn't dead. Not pastel weakness, she wasn't defeated. Deep sapphire blue, cut simply, expensive. The kind of dress that said she had nothing to apologize for. "Miss?" Margaret's voice was uncertain. "Where are we going?" "Out." "But your father said—" "My father can say what he likes. Get my cloak." She walked through Mayfair like she owned it. Head high, pace steady, meeting every eye that dared to look. Women pulled their daughters aside as she passed. Men tipped their hats with expressions ranging from confusion to admiration to barely concealed contempt. She didn't care. At the corner of Berkeley Square, she nearly collided with Elizabeth Hartwell, the woman whose stage whisper had followed her down the aisle. "Miss Whitmore." Lady Hartwell's smile was poisonous honey. "How brave of you to show your face. I was just telling Lady Pemberton that you must be simply devastated." "Were you?" Clara kept her voice pleasant. "How kind of you to waste your time discussing my private affairs. I'm quite well, as you can see." Still, such a terrible thing, to be left like that. The whole city is talking about. Let them talk. Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the shock flicker across Lady Hartwell's painted face. "I find I don't particularly care what the whole city thinks." She walked away before the woman could respond, feeling Margaret's nervous energy beside her like a taut string. They took tea at Fortnum and Mason. Clara ordered the most expensive blend, took a table by the window where everyone could see her, and sat with her back straight and her hands steady on the porcelain. Around her, conversations paused and restarted, eyes darted and slid away, whispers multiplied like insects. Let them look, let them whisper. She was done hiding. "Miss Clara," Margaret whispered, "people are staring." "I know." "It's making me nervous, miss." "Then stop looking at them." The woman at the next table, Mrs. Caroline Ashford, mother of the Whispering Sisters, leaned toward her companion loud enough to be heard. "Some people have no shame. If it were my daughter, I'd have sent her to the country until this all died down." Clara set down her teacup with a gentle click, turned to face Mrs. Ashford directly. "Forgive me for overhearing, Mrs. Ashford, but if you're going to discuss me, you might as well do it to my face. It seems more efficient." Mrs. Ashford's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Her companion's face went scarlet. "I was merely, that is, I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said, that I should hide, should be ashamed, should disappear until everyone forgets that a man lied to me and ran away like a coward." Clara's voice was perfectly level, perfectly calm. "But here's what you don't understand, Mrs. Ashford. I'm not the one who should be ashamed. I'm not the one who broke promises and fled to France. I'm not the one who gambled away more money than I could repay and tried to fix it by marrying for a dowry." She stood, gathering her gloves. "I'm the one who was honest, who showed up, who kept her word. So if anyone in this city should be hiding, it isn't me." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara left enough coins on the table to cover the bill and a generous tip, nodded to Margaret, and walked out into the afternoon sun with her head high and her hands shaking only slightly. By evening, the story had spread. By the next morning, it was in the papers. Miss W., recently abandoned by her intended, seen taking tea at Fortnum's and delivering a cutting set-down to one of society's most prominent gossips. Could this be the beginning of the abandoned bride's revenge? Her father was livid. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've made yourself even more of a spectacle." "I was already a spectacle. At least now I'm a spectacle on my own terms." "Clara, please, Be reasonable. This kind of behavior will only make things worse. Worse than what? Worse than being abandoned at the altar? Worse than having my name dragged through every drawing room in London? Worse than watching people I've known my entire life cross the street to avoid me? She faced him across the study, this man who'd tried to protect her by telling her to hide. I'm not running, Father. Not to Derbyshire, not anywhere. They can talk all they want. I'm staying right here. Then what? His voice cracked with frustration. What's your plan? To antagonize every matron in London until they hate you even more? My plan, Clara said quietly, is to stop letting other people decide what my life means. The invitation still didn't come, but something else did. Attention. The kind of attention that follows scandal, like vultures follow death. Yes, but also something sharper. People watching her walk through the park, noting the cut of her dress, the steadiness of her step. Young women whispering behind their fans, not all of it cruel. Men looking at her with reassessment in their eyes. Not all of it welcome, but not all of it pitying either. She was becoming a story. Not the story they'd written for her, the abandoned bride, pitiful and ruined, but something more complicated. A woman who refused to disappear. Who refused to apologize for someone else's betrayal. It wasn't respect, not yet. But it was interesting. And in London society, interesting could be more dangerous than invisible. The real test came 3 weeks later, when an invitation finally arrived. Not to a small tea or a private dinner, but to the season's most important event, Lady Catherine Blackwood's annual ball. The invitation that everyone who mattered received, the event where reputations were made and broken, where the season's marriages were negotiated and the next year's social order was determined. Clara stared at the heavy cream cardstock with her name written in elegant script. It's a trap, her father said. Probably. They'll be watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake, to show weakness, to give them something else to gossip about. I know. Then you're not going. Clara looked up at him, this man who'd tried so hard to protect her, and didn't understand that protection wasn't what she needed anymore. Yes, I am. The dressmaker came to the house the day before the ball. Madame Rousseau was French, expensive, and ruthlessly honest, which was why she'd dressed 3 generations of Whitmore women and why Clara trusted her more than most of the people who called themselves friends. You need to look perfect, Margaret had insisted that morning, hovering while Clara picked at her breakfast. Not a hair out of place, not a stitch wrong. They'll be looking for any excuse. I don't need to look perfect, Clara interrupted. I need to look deliberate. Madame Rousseau understood immediately when Clara described what she wanted. Ah, the dressmaker's eyes gleamed. You are going to war. Something like that. Then we dress you like a warrior, no? Something that makes them remember you are not broken. Her hands moved through fabric samples spread across the drawing room table, silks and satins in every shade. She paused on a deep emerald green. This, with your coloring, with your eyes, they will not be able to look away. Too obvious, Clara said. I don't want to look like I'm trying to shock them. You don't want shock, you want... Madame Rousseau's fingers drifted to a different bolt of fabric, midnight blue shot through with silver thread that caught the light like stars. You want them to see strength, confidence, a woman who knows exactly who she is. Clara touched the fabric, felt the cool slip of silk under her fingers. Yes, that. The dress took shape over the next 18 hours. Clara stood for fittings while Madame Rousseau and her 2 assistants pinned and stitched and adjusted, the gown transforming from fabric into armor. Not literally, there was no chainmail, no breastplate, but Clara could feel it nonetheless. The way the bodice supported without restricting, the way the skirt moved like water but held its shape, the way the neckline framed her collarbones without revealing too much or too little. You look like a queen, Margaret whispered when it was finished. Clara studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the bride who'd walked down the aisle 6 weeks ago. That woman had been softer, younger, uncertain beneath the confidence. This woman's eyes were harder, older, sure. I look like someone who refuses to apologize, Clara said. The dress was only part of it. The rest was in her head, in the decision she'd made standing in her father's study 3 days ago while he begged her not to go to this ball. She was done being careful, done measuring her words and her steps against what other people expected. Thomas had already ruined her reputation. There was nothing left to protect, which meant, for the first time in her life, she was free. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like opening a window in a room that had been sealed shut for years. Her father was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when she descended the night of the ball. He looked tired, older than his 53 years, his evening clothes immaculate but his face drawn. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." "Clara!" He caught her hand as she reached for her cloak. "You don't have to do this. We could still leave for Derbyshire tonight. Start fresh somewhere they don't know the story." "They'll know the story everywhere, Father. Scandal travels faster than we do." Then we waited out. A year, 2 years. Eventually what? Eventually they'll forget and I can come back and pretend none of this happened? Marry some country squire who doesn't care that I was jilted because his estate needs my dowry? She pulled her hand free gently. "I'd rather face them." "Even if they destroy you?" "They can't destroy me any more than they already have." Clara fastened the cloak at her throat. "The worst thing that could happen already did. Everything else is just noise." The carriage ride to the Blackwood mansion took 20 minutes through streets still damp from afternoon rain. Clara watched London pass outside the window, gas lamps flickering to life, couples hurrying to theaters and dinners, a city full of people with their own problems and scandals and secrets. Her ruin was yesterday's news to most of them. It was only in her own small circle that it still mattered. That thought should have been comforting. It wasn't. The Blackwood estate blazed with light, every window glowing, carriages lined up the street disgorging passengers in their finest clothes. Clara's stomach clenched as their carriage joined the queue as she watched other guests ascending the marble steps. Women in jewels and men in tailcoats, all of them people she knew, all of them people who'd been whispering about her for weeks. "Last chance," her father murmured. Clara stepped out of the carriage. The entrance hall was packed with arrivals, the air thick with perfume and pomade, and the particular energy of 300 people trying to see and be seen simultaneously. Clara handed her cloak to a footman and felt the exact moment the crowd noticed her. It started as a ripple of silence spreading outward from where she stood. Conversations dying mid-sentence, heads turning, fans snapping shut or fluttering faster depending on the wielder's temperament. Then the whispers began. Not even trying to be subtle now, just a rising tide of speculation and shock and barely concealed delight that the abandoned bride had actually shown her face. "Is that—" She came. "The nerve! Look at that dress!" Her father's arm was rigid under her hand. Clara squeezed once. "I'm fine," and started forward. The crowd parted. Some people stepped aside out of courtesy, others out of a desire not to be associated with scandal, but they all moved. Clara walked through them like Moses through the Red Sea, feeling their eyes on her back, hearing the whispers multiply in her wake. The ballroom was worse. Bigger, brighter, more people. The orchestra was playing something light and forgettable, couples swirling across the marble floor in patterns as old as society itself. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbow light across everything, making the whole scene feel slightly unreal, like a stage set for a play about wealth and manners and judgment. Lady Catherine Blackwood stood near the entrance receiving guests, a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been Clara's mother's closest friend, had held Clara as a baby, had taught her how to navigate society's treacherous waters with grace and steel. "Clara," Lady Catherine's voice was warm, but her eyes were assessing. "You came. You invited me." "I did." A pause. "Against considerable advice, I should mention." "Then why did you?" Lady Catherine smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Because I wanted to see if you were as strong as your mother. She would have come too, you know, walked right through the fire just to prove she could." "And am I? As strong as she was?" "We'll see by the end of the night, won't we?" Lady Catherine's gaze flicked past Clara's shoulder. "The vultures are circling, don't let them smell blood." Clara turned to find half the room watching her with varying degrees of interest, hostility, and calculation. The Ashford sisters near the refreshment table, whispering behind their fans. Lord Pemberton with a cluster of other gentlemen, probably discussing the betting book at White's. Elizabeth Hartwell holding court near the musicians, her expression somewhere between vindictive pleasure and disappointment that Clara hadn't stayed home. Miss Whitmore. The voice came from behind her, male and unfamiliar. Clara turned to find a man she didn't recognize. Early 30s, dark hair, expensive clothes that somehow looked uncomfortable on him like he wasn't used to formal wear. Forgive me, I don't believe we've met, Clara said. No, I'm Adrian Hale. He said it like the name should mean something. When Clara's expression didn't change, his mouth twitched. The Duke of Ashford. Oh, that Adrian Hale. The one who'd inherited his title 3 years ago after his father died in a hunting accident, who'd been in India managing the family's trading interests and had barely set foot in London society since returning. The one everyone said was brilliant but abrasive, wealthy but uninterested in the usual aristocratic pursuits, powerful but difficult. Your Grace. Clara dropped a curtsy that was technically correct but lacking in warmth. I wanted to meet the woman brave enough to walk into this nest of vipers after what happened. His eyes were gray, sharp, missing nothing. Or foolish enough. I haven't decided which yet. Does it matter? Probably not. Bravery and foolishness often look the same from the outside. He glanced around the ballroom with poorly concealed disdain. I hate these things. Everyone performing for everyone else, pretending they care about anything except who's richer or better connected or more likely to advance their own interests. Then why are you here? Lady Catherine insisted. She's one of the few people in London whose opinion I value. His attention snapped back to Clara. She also said you were worth meeting, that you had more spine than the rest of these peacocks combined. She said that? Not in those exact words, I'm paraphrasing. He offered his arm. Would you like to dance? Give them something to really talk about. Clara stared at him. Adrian Hale wasn't traditionally handsome, his face was too sharp, his manner too blunt, but there was something compelling about him. An honesty that bordered on rudeness, a complete lack of the performance she was so tired of watching. Why would you dance with me? She asked. You must know it'll start rumors. I'm counting on it. I find rumors are useful for separating people worth knowing from people who believe everything they hear. His hand was still extended. Besides, you're the most interesting person in this room. Everyone else is terrified of being interesting. Against her better judgment, or maybe because of it, Clara took his arm. The whispers that had followed her entrance were nothing compared to the ones that erupted when Adrian led her onto the dance floor. She could feel the shock radiating outward, could see Elizabeth Hartwell's mouth literally hanging open, could sense her father's tension from across the room. You realize you just made yourself part of my scandal, Clara said as Adrian's hand settled at her waist. Good. I was getting bored anyway. He was a better dancer than she expected, moving with a precision that suggested military training or exceptional coordination. Tell me something. Why did you come tonight? To prove I'm not afraid. Are you? Afraid? Clara considered lying, decided against it. Terrified. But they don't need to know that. His smile was unexpected, transforming his serious face into something almost warm. Honest. I like that. Most people in this room haven't said an honest thing in years. They turned, and Clara caught sight of her reflection in one of the gilt-framed mirrors lining the walls. The woman spinning in midnight blue beside a duke looked confident, composed, untouchable. Nothing like the woman who'd stood abandoned at the altar 6 weeks ago. What about you? Clara asked. Why did Lady Catherine think I was worth meeting? Because she's known me since I was in short pants and she knows I can't stand false people. And because... He paused, choosing words carefully. Because she thought we might understand each other. Both of us dealing with society's expectations. Both of us not particularly interested in playing by their rules. I played by their rules my entire life. Look where it got me. Exactly my point. The music swelled, and Adrian pulled her through a turn that brought them dangerously close to improper. Rules written by people who care more about appearances than truth are worth breaking. Easy to say when you're a duke. Harder when you're a woman with a destroyed reputation and no real power. You have more power than you think. Look around. Every person in this room is watching you right now, wondering what you'll do next. That's not powerlessness. That's leverage. The dance ended. Adrian bowed, Clara curtsied, and the ballroom exploded into conversation the moment they stepped apart. That was a mistake, Clara's father appeared at her elbow, his voice low and urgent. Dancing with Hale like that, in front of everyone, was exactly what I needed to do, Clara finished. Father, please, trust me. Clara. But she was already moving away toward the refreshment table where the Ashford sisters were pretending not to stare at her while obviously staring at her. Good evening, Eleanor, Philippa. Clara kept her voice pleasant, her smile polite. The sisters exchanged glances. Eleanor, the elder, recovered first. Miss Whitmore, what a surprise to see you here. Is it? Lady Catherine invited me. Yes, but we all thought, that is, after everything. Philippa's face flushed. You must be so brave. Brave or desperate, Eleanor muttered into her champagne. Clara felt the old instinct rise to apologize, to smooth things over, to make herself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. She crushed it. Neither, actually. I'm simply here, the same as you. It's hardly the same, Eleanor said, her voice taking on an edge. We didn't. She stopped, realizing she'd backed herself into saying something unforgivably rude, even by current standards. Didn't get abandoned at the altar? Clara supplied. No, you didn't. Congratulations on your good fortune. Though, if I remember correctly, Eleanor, you've been engaged 3 times and called it off twice yourself. At least Thomas had the decency to run before making vows he didn't mean. Eleanor's face went scarlet. How dare you? Quite easily, as it turns out. Clara selected a glass of champagne from a passing footman. Enjoy your evening, ladies. She walked away feeling their shocked stares burning into her back, feeling the attention of everyone within earshot now focused on her like a spotlight. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing, but underneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously like exhilaration. The next hour passed in a blur of small confrontations and careful navigation. Lord Pemberton tried to corner her with thinly veiled suggestions about how her reduced circumstances might make her more amenable to certain arrangements. Clara shut him down so thoroughly that he retreated with his face purple with rage. Lady Hartwell attempted a cutting remark about the quality of Clara's dress, clearly trying too hard, clearly from inferior fabric. Clara thanked her sweetly for the compliment and moved on. But it was exhausting. Every conversation a potential trap, every smile hiding calculation, every word measured against how it would sound when repeated in tomorrow's drawing rooms. Clara found herself in the garden halfway through the evening, desperate for air that didn't taste like perfume and judgment. The terrace was empty except for a few couples stealing scandalous moments in the shadows. Clara moved past them to the far end where the formal gardens began, leaning against the stone balustrade and closing her eyes. Running away already? Adrian Hale's voice. Clara didn't open her eyes. Just catching my breath. Understandable. It's like gladiatorial combat in there, except the weapons are words, and the blood is reputation. Poetic. Accurate. He moved to stand beside her, looking out over the garden instead of at her. You're doing well, by the way. Better than most people would in your position. I don't feel like I'm doing well. I feel like I'm drowning and pretending I know how to swim. That's all any of us are doing. The ones who look most confident are usually the ones most desperate to hide their fear. He pulled out a silver case, extracted a cigarette. Do you mind? It's not my terrace. He lit it, the flame briefly illuminating his face, all sharp angles and serious eyes. Can I tell you something? Can I stop you? A huff of amusement. Probably not. Here it is. Everyone in there thinks they know what happened with you and Crawford. They've decided on a narrative. You did something wrong, or you weren't good enough, or whatever lets them sleep at night believing the world is fair and people get what they deserve. But I've met Crawford. Briefly, years ago. He's a coward and a liar who's good at pretending to be charming. Adrian took a drag, exhaled smoke into the night air. Whatever happened, it wasn't your fault. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because if it had been your fault, you wouldn't be in there facing them down. You'd be in Derbyshire hiding from it. Clara opened her eyes, looked at him properly. Why are you being kind to me? Is this kind? I thought I was being honest. In my experience, the two are rarely the same thing. Then you've been talking to the wrong people. He stubbed out the cigarette, turned to face her fully. I'm being honest because I'm tired of watching society destroy people for entertainment. And I'm being friendly, I suppose, because Lady Catherine was right. You are worth knowing. Before Clara could respond, the terrace doors burst open and Elizabeth Hartwell swept out, followed by a cluster of her usual sycophants. Oh! Lady Hartwell's eyes went wide with theatrical delight. Miss Whitmore, Your Grace, how cozy. Clara felt Adrian tense beside her, felt the trap closing, because of course it was a trap. Being alone with a man in a darkened garden, even on the terrace, even with dozens of people nearby, was exactly the kind of thing that could turn a scandal into a catastrophe. Lady Hartwell. Clara kept her voice level. Lovely evening. Indeed, though I must say I'm surprised to find you out here, unchaperoned, with a gentleman. The emphasis on the last word made it sound dirty. One might think you were courting even more scandal. One might think, Adrian said coldly, that you're making something out of nothing. Miss Whitmore and I were simply getting some air. Unlike some people, we don't feel the need to fill every moment with meaningless gossip. Lady Hartwell's smile turned venomous. Of course, Your Grace. I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation, just as I'm sure everyone will believe it when they hear about it tomorrow. She swept back inside, her followers trailing behind her like ducklings, already whispering among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Clara closed her eyes. That's going to be everywhere by morning. Let it. Easy for you to say. You're a duke. I'm a woman who was having a conversation on a terrace full of witnesses. Nothing happened, Clara. Nothing even close to inappropriate. That won't matter. The story will be that we were... She couldn't finish the sentence. Then we make sure the real story is more interesting than whatever Lady Hartwell invents. Adrian offered his arm again. Come on, let's go back inside, together. Let them see we have nothing to hide. It was the opposite of what Clara's instincts screamed at her to do. Every lesson she'd ever learned about propriety, about protecting her reputation, about the careful dance of society's expectations told her to leave immediately, to put distance between herself and Adrian Hale, to do damage control before this turned into something worse. But her reputation was already ruined. What was one more scandal piled on top? She took his arm. They walked back into the ballroom like they owned it, and the whispers that followed them were loud enough to drown out the orchestra. Clara could see her father across the room, his face pale with worry, could see Lady Catherine watching with something that might have been approval or might have been concern. Could see Elizabeth Hartwell holding court near the champagne fountain, already spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen. Dance with me again, Adrian said. That's madness. It'll only make things worse. Or it'll make it clear we don't care what they think. His hand was already guiding her toward the floor. Your choice. Clara looked around the ballroom, at all these people who judged her, pitied her, gossiped about her, reduced her to a cautionary tale about what happens to women who get too confident, or trust too easily, or dare to want something for themselves. Yes, she said. This dance was different from the first. More people were watching now, the whispers louder, the speculation more intense. Clara could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on her shoulders, could sense the judgment building like a storm. Ignore them, Adrian murmured. I'm trying. Try harder. They're not worth your energy. But they were. That was the problem. These people controlled everything. Who was received in polite society, who got invited to important events, who was considered marriageable, who had access to the networks of power and influence that ran the country. Their opinions might be based on gossip and lies, but their opinions still had consequences. The music ended. Clara curtsied, Adrian bowed, and Miss Whitmore. The voice cut through the ballroom noise like a knife through silk. Cold, familiar, impossible. Clara turned and her heart stopped. Thomas Crawford stood 10 feet away, dressed impeccably in evening clothes, his hair perfectly arranged, his face wearing that same charming smile she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. He looked like he'd never left, like he'd never written that cold letter, like he'd never run away to France. The ballroom went silent. Every eye turned from Clara to Thomas and back again, watching, waiting to see what would happen when the abandoned bride came face to face with the man who'd destroyed her. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears and the sick lurch of her stomach, and the absolute unreality of seeing him here, now, after everything. Clara. Thomas took a step closer, and she could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn when he proposed, when he kissed her, when he lied to her face. I was hoping I'd find you here. We need to talk. Adrian's hand tightened on Clara's arm, not restraining her but steadying her, reminding her she wasn't alone. We have nothing to talk about, Clara said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Thomas's smile didn't waver. He'd always been good at performing, at making people believe whatever version of himself he wanted them to see. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You're asking? The words tasted like acid. You don't get to ask me for anything. Clara, I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But if you'd just let me explain… Explain? Something hot and vicious rose in her chest. You left me standing at the altar in front of 300 people. You wrote me a letter like I was a business transaction you'd decided to cancel. You disappeared to France without a word. What could you possibly explain that would matter? The ballroom was so quiet, Clara could hear the rustle of silk as women leaned closer to hear better, could feel the collective held breath of everyone watching this scene unfold, like a play staged for their entertainment. I panicked. Thomas took another step forward. His eyes were earnest, pleading, exactly the way they'd been when he proposed. I got scared of the commitment, of the responsibility. I know it was cowardly. I know I should have talked to you instead of running, but I'm here now. I came back to make things right. Make things right? Clara laughed, the sound harsh enough to make people flinch. You think showing up at a ball 6 weeks later makes things right? I think we owed each other more than I gave you. I think… He glanced around at their audience, then back to her with what looked like genuine emotion. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life letting you go, and I'd like the chance to fix it. The whispers started then, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Clara could hear fragments. He came back for her. How romantic. Maybe there's hope. And she wanted to scream. Wanted to tell them this wasn't romance, it was manipulation. Wanted to shake them until they understood that pretty words didn't erase ugly actions. No. The word came out flat, final. Thomas blinked. What? I said no. You don't get to waltz back into my life and pretend the past 6 weeks didn't happen. You don't get to apologize your way out of what you did. I'm not trying to… Clara, please. I'm trying to be honest with you. Then be honest about why you really left. Clara pulled away from Adrian's steadying grip, stepped closer to Thomas, close enough to see the flicker of alarm in his eyes. Tell them about the gambling debts, the money you owed half of London, the fact that you were marrying me for my dowry, not for love. Thomas's face went pale. That's not… Where did you hear… Your former secretary, Peter Wright. He showed me your accounts, your letters to creditors, everything. Clara's voice rose, carrying across the silent ballroom. You were drowning in debt, and you thought marrying me would save you. But my father was too smart to release my dowry before the wedding, so you ran, like a coward. That's a lie. But his voice lacked conviction, and everyone could hear it. Is it? Then explain why you disappeared the moment you realized you couldn't get the money. Explain why you fled to France instead of facing your responsibilities. I told you, I panicked. About the debts? Or about me? Thomas's jaw tightened. For a moment, Clara saw something real beneath the charm. Anger, resentment, calculation. Then the mask slammed back into place. You're upset. I understand, but making wild accusations in front of all these people is exactly what you deserve. Clara was shaking now, fury and adrenaline making her hands tremble. You humiliated me. You made me a joke. You let everyone in this room believe there was something wrong with me, that I'd done something to drive you away. And now you want me to quietly forgive you so you can what? Try again? Find another way to get your hands on my money? It wasn't like that. Thomas reached for her hand. She jerked away. Clara, I love you. I made mistakes, but that doesn't change how I feel. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare talk to me about love. You don't know what the word means. Miss Whitmore. A new voice, female, cutting through the tension. Lady Catherine appeared at Clara's side, her presence commanding immediate attention. Perhaps this conversation would be better conducted in private. There's nothing private to discuss, Clara said without taking her eyes off Thomas. He said what he came to say. Now he can leave. I'm not leaving until we talk properly. Thomas's voice took on an edge. Until you listen, the lady has made herself clear. Adrian stepped forward, positioning himself between Clara and Thomas with the kind of casual authority that came from never doubting your right to command space. You should go. Thomas's eyes narrowed. And who are you to tell me what to do? Her new protector? Moving on rather quickly, isn't she? The insult landed exactly as intended. Clara heard the gasps, saw the calculation in people's eyes, first abandoned, now throwing herself at a duke. How desperate, how improper, how scandalous. Be very careful what you say next, Adrian said softly. There was steel underneath the quiet words. I promise you won't like the consequences. Is that a threat, Your Grace? Thomas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. How noble of you defending her honor, though from what I hear that ship has already sailed. Clara felt the words like a physical blow, heard the sharp intake of breath from the crowd, the whispers starting again, faster now, vicious. Get out! Her father appeared from nowhere, his face purple with rage. Get out of this house before I have you thrown out! I was invited, same as everyone else. Not anymore. Lady Catherine's voice was ice. You're no longer welcome here, Mr. Crawford. Leave, now. For a moment, Thomas looked like he might argue. Then his eyes swept across the ballroom, taking in the faces watching him, the judgment slowly turning his direction. And Clara saw him make a choice, saw him decide this wasn't the moment to push. This isn't over, he said quietly, looking directly at Clara. We still need to talk. We really don't. He left, finally, weaving through the crowd toward the exit. The moment the doors closed behind him, the ballroom erupted into conversation. Everyone talking at once, voices rising and falling, theories and speculation and commentary all blending into a wall of noise that made Clara's head spin. I need to leave, she said to no one in particular. Not yet. Lady Catherine's hand on her arm was gentle but firm. If you leave now, you let him win. You let everyone believe you're running away again. I'm not running, Clara couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't know what she was. Angry, exhausted, humiliated all over again, but in a different way. You're standing your ground, Adrian said. You just told him, and everyone here, exactly what he did. You exposed him. That took courage. It took anger. Sometimes they're the same thing. He caught a passing footman, took 2 glasses of champagne, pressed one into Clara's shaking hand. Drink this, breathe, then we'll get through the rest of the evening. I don't think I can. You can. You've already done the hard part. But he was wrong. The hard part was just beginning. The rest of the ball passed in a blur of forced smiles and brittle conversation. People approached Clara with a strange mix of sympathy and curiosity, like she was an exotic animal in a zoo. Fascinating to observe, but ultimately foreign. Some of the comments were supportive, others thinly veiled attempts to extract more gossip. Clara navigated them all with her jaw tight and her hands clenched around her champagne glass, hard enough to make her knuckles white. Adrian stayed close, a steady presence at her elbow. He didn't hover, didn't try to speak for her, just remained visibly present in a way that made it clear he wasn't ashamed to be associated with her. It helped more than Clara wanted to admit. By midnight, she was ready to collapse. Her father found her near the terrace doors, looking longingly at the garden and the escape it represented. We can leave now, he said quietly. You've stayed long enough. Has it helped, or did I just make everything worse? I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow when the papers come out. The carriage ride home was silent. Clara stared out the window at London passing by. Darker now, quieter, the city settling into sleep while her mind raced with everything that had happened. Thomas's return, his accusations, her response, the way everyone had watched like she was entertainment instead of a person. You were right about one thing, her father said as they pulled up to their house. About not hiding. If you'd run to Derbyshire, he would have controlled the narrative. Now at least people know his side isn't the only truth. Do they? Or do they just have 2 stories to choose from instead of one? I suppose we'll find out. Clara fell into bed, still wearing her ball gown, too exhausted to ring for Margaret, too wrung out to care about propriety or proper undressing or anything except closing her eyes and making this day end. Sleep didn't come. She lay in the dark listening to the house settle, replaying every moment of the evening, every word exchanged, every look on Thomas's face. Had he really come back thinking she'd forgive him, or had it been something else, a performance designed to make him look good, to shift the narrative back in his favor? She didn't know. Didn't trust her own judgment anymore when it came to Thomas Crawford and his motivations. The papers the next morning were brutal. Jilted bride confronts runaway groom at society's grandest ball. Crawford returns, claims love. Miss W. accuses him of fortune hunting. Duke of Ashford defends abandoned bride. New romance or simple kindness? The stories varied in tone and detail, but they all agreed on the essentials. Thomas had returned, Clara had rejected him publicly, accusations had flown, and somehow the Duke of Ashford had gotten tangled up in the middle of it all. Half the writers seemed to think Clara was a brave woman standing up for herself. The other half thought she was a bitter, vindictive creature who couldn't accept that a man had changed his mind. At least they're talking about something other than your humiliation, Margaret offered weakly. Setting down tea, Clara had no intention of drinking. Now they're talking about my anger instead. I'm not sure that's better. A knock at her door. Her father's voice strained. Clara, you have a visitor. Tell them I'm not receiving. It's the Duke of Ashford. He says it's urgent. Clara dragged herself out of bed, threw on a dressing gown over her nightdress. Scandalous to receive a gentleman this way, but she was beyond caring, and descended to the drawing room where Adrian paced like a caged animal. You need to see this. He thrust a letter at her the moment she entered. It arrived at my house an hour ago. The paper was expensive, the handwriting elegant. Clara scanned it quickly, then read it again more slowly, her stomach sinking with each line. Your Grace, I trust you enjoyed your evening with Miss Whitmore. However, I feel compelled to inform you of certain facts you may not be aware of regarding her character and past behavior. While I hesitate to speak ill of a woman I once intended to marry, honor demands I warn you against forming attachments to someone so fundamentally unsuited to the role of Duchess. Miss Whitmore's temperament is, shall we say, difficult. She is prone to jealousy, to making scenes, to behavior unbecoming a woman of her station. During our engagement, I discovered several troubling aspects of her personality that ultimately led to my decision to end our arrangement. I would be happy to discuss these matters in more detail, should you wish to know the full truth before committing yourself to association with her. Your servant, T. Crawford. He's trying to poison your opinion of me. Clara handed the letter back, her hands surprisingly steady. Smart. If he can't win me back, he can at least destroy any other options I might have. He's not going to succeed. Adrian's voice was hard. I'm not an idiot, Clara. I can see through this. Can everyone? Or will some people believe him? She sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted all over again. He's going to spread this story everywhere, to everyone who might consider associating with me. He'll paint me as unstable, difficult, impossible to please. And people will believe him because it's easier than admitting he's a liar. Then we make sure his lies don't stick. How? By having you defend me again? That just feeds into his narrative, that I need a man's protection because I can't handle myself. No. Adrian sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. By giving people a different story to focus on. One that's more interesting than Crawford's petty revenge. What story? He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gray eyes. The one where you and I are courting. Clara stared at him. What? Think about it. Right now you're the abandoned bride, and I'm the Duke who defended her honor. Crawford is trying to make it seem like there's something wrong with you, that any association with you is a mistake. But if we're publicly courting, if I make it clear I'm pursuing you intentionally, not out of pity or obligation, it undercuts everything he's trying to do. That's insane. Is it? Or is it practical? It's a lie. Is it? Adrian's gaze didn't waver. I enjoyed talking to you last night. I respect how you handled yourself. I'd like to see you again. That's not entirely fabricated. Clara's heart was beating too fast. You're a duke. You could court anyone. Why would you tie yourself to a scandal? Because I'm tired of women who perform for me, who see a title and a fortune and turn themselves into whatever they think I want. You don't do that. You're honest. You're sharp. You don't need me to rescue you. You just need someone to stand beside you while you rescue yourself. He paused. And because watching you face down Crawford last night was the most genuine thing I've seen in London society in years. This is madness, probably. But it's better than letting him win. Clara wanted to say no, wanted to tell Adrian this was too much, too complicated, too likely to blow up in both their faces. But the alternative was watching Thomas Crawford slowly destroy what remained of her reputation, turning her into a cautionary tale about difficult women and the men wise enough to avoid them. If we do this, she said slowly, it has to look real. People will be watching for any sign it's a performance. Then we make it real. How? By actually spending time together, by letting people see us at the theater, in the park, at dinners, by building something that looks genuine because it is, even if it started for strategic reasons. It was reckless, dangerous, exactly the kind of bold move that could save her or ruin her further, depending on how it played out.
All right, Clara heard herself say. Let's try it. Adrian's smile was sharp, satisfied. Good, I'll call on you tomorrow, publicly, with flowers. He left, and Clara sat in the drawing room trying to process what she'd just agreed to. A fake courtship that might become real. A partnership born from scandal and strategy. A gamble that could change everything or destroy what little she had left. Her father appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral. I couldn't help overhearing. I suppose you think I'm being foolish. I think you're being brave or desperate, possibly both. He moved into the room, poured himself a drink from the sideboard even though it was barely noon. Hale is a good man from what I hear. Difficult, but honest. If anyone can help you rebuild from this, it's him. I'm not trying to rebuild, Father. I'm trying to survive. Sometimes they're the same thing. The next 3 weeks unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Adrian called on Clara every afternoon, bringing flowers and books, and conversation that ranged from politics to poetry to the absurdity of London society. They attended the theater together, sat in his box where everyone could see them, laughed at the performances, and ignored the whispers. They rode in Hyde Park during the fashionable hour, Clara in a new riding habit the color of deep wine, Adrian on a black horse that matched his severe wardrobe. People stared, people gossiped, but slowly, grudgingly, the narrative began to shift. If the Duke of Ashford was courting Clara Whitmore openly, perhaps there wasn't something wrong with her after all. Perhaps Crawford had been lying. Perhaps this was a love story instead of a scandal. Clara almost believed it herself sometimes. Adrian was easy to be with in a way Thomas never had been. He didn't perform, didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. When he disagreed with her, he said so directly. When he enjoyed her company, he showed it without artifice. It was refreshing, dangerous, intoxicating in small doses. "Are you falling for him?" Margaret asked one evening while helping Clara dress for yet another ball. "Don't be ridiculous." "It's not ridiculous, miss. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room, and you look at him like—" She stopped. "Like what?" "Like you're not sure whether to trust it, but you want to." Clara didn't answer because Margaret was right. The danger signs started small. A letter that arrived at her father's house with no return address, containing nothing but a newspaper clipping about Clara and Adrian with the word liar, scrawled across it in angry red ink. A rumor that spread through the servants' network about Thomas Crawford asking questions, trying to find ammunition he could use against her. Then came the morning Clara left her house to find her carriage wheels slashed, the leather seats cut to ribbons, a crude message painted on the side. "Whore." "It's escalating," her father said, staring at the damage with his face pale. "He's not going to stop." "Then I won't either." "Clara, this isn't a game anymore. This is dangerous." "It was always dangerous. I just didn't realize it yet." Adrian arrived within the hour of hearing about the carriage, his face thunderous. "You need to press charges. Go to the magistrate." "And say what? That I think my former fiancé is vandalizing my property? I have no proof." "Everyone knows it's him." "Knowing and proving are different things." Clara looked at the ruined carriage.
at the ugly word still dripping paint. He's trying to scare me, to make me hide again. Is it working? No. She turned to face him. But I need your help. Anything. I want to confront him, publicly. Force him to either back down or expose himself as the coward he is. Clara, I'm tired of reacting, Adrian. Tired of defending myself against accusations and whispers and vandalism. I want to go on the offensive. How? There's a ball next week at Lord Pemberton's estate. Thomas will be there. He's been worming his way back into society, trading on sympathy about how I rejected him. I want to attend. With you. I want to make it clear I'm not afraid of him. That's exactly what he wants. He's trying to provoke you into doing something reckless. Then I'll be reckless on my own terms. Clara's voice was hard. Are you with me or not? Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. Always. The week leading up to Pemberton's ball was tense. Clara caught Thomas watching her twice, once from across the street as she left a shop, once in the park from a distance. He never approached, never spoke, just watched with an expression she couldn't read. He's planning something, Margaret said nervously. I know. Maybe you shouldn't go to the ball, miss. Maybe this is too dangerous. I'm going. The night of the ball, Clara dressed in the midnight blue gown again, the one she'd worn when she first faced them all down, the one that had become a kind of armor. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who'd survived abandonment, scandal, and slow-burning threats, who'd learned to fight back, who refused to disappear. Adrian arrived to collect her personally, breaking protocol by coming to the door instead of sending his carriage. He looked at her for a long moment, then offered his arm. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. Pemberton's estate was blazing with light, music spilling out into the warm June night. Clara and Adrian arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that turned heads and stopped conversations. They moved through the crowd together, united front, and Clara felt the weight of all those eyes like a physical pressure. Thomas was there. Of course he was. Standing near the refreshment table with a glass of wine and a smile that looked almost genuine if you didn't know him. He watched Clara enter, watched her take Adrian's arm, and something flickered across his face too fast to name. The first hour passed without incident. Clara danced with Adrian twice, conversed with Lady Catherine and several other women who'd cautiously begun speaking to her again, even laughed at something genuinely funny Lord Ashworth said about parliamentary procedure. She was starting to think maybe this would be fine. Maybe Thomas had finally given up. Maybe... Miss Whitmore? He appeared at her elbow during a break in the music, his voice low and urgent. Please, I need to speak with you, privately. It's important. No. Clara, please. It's about your father. Something you need to know. My father is fine. Whatever you're about to say is a lie designed to get me alone. I'm not falling for it. Thomas's expression shifted. The charm dropped away, replaced by something colder. You're making a mistake, parading around with Ashford like you've won something. You think he actually cares about you? He's using you, Clara, the same way you're using him. That's the difference between us, Thomas. I'm honest about my arrangements. You lied about yours. I loved you. His voice dropped to a whisper. I still do. Everything I did because I loved you too much and didn't know how to handle it. Don't, Clara stepped back. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the hero. You left me at the altar because you needed money and couldn't get it. That's not love. That's cowardice. You self-righteous... He caught himself, glanced around at the people starting to notice their conversation, forced a smile that looked like a wound. We'll finish this later. No, we won't. We're finished, Thomas. Completely. She walked away, heart pounding, and found Adrian waiting near the terrace doors. His eyes were sharp, assessing. What did he want? To convince me he still loves me. To make me doubt you. Clara took a shaky breath. It didn't work. Good. Adrian's hand found hers, squeezed once. Let's get some air. They stepped out onto the terrace, the same terrace where Lady Hartwell had tried to catch them in a scandal weeks ago. The garden beyond was lit with lanterns, couples drifting through the paths like ghosts. Clara moved to the stone balustrade, gripping it hard enough to hurt. I hate this, she said quietly. Hate that he still has power over me. Hate that I can't just... Miss Whitmore. Thomas's voice again,
but different now, harder. Clara turned to find him standing in the terrace doorway, and her stomach dropped because his face was wrong. The charm was completely gone, replaced by something raw and desperate and dangerous. "We need to talk. Now." "I told you." "I'm not asking." He moved forward, and Clara saw Adrian tense beside her. "You've ruined me, Clara. Spread your lies until no one will extend me credit, until my own family has cut me off. This is your fault." "My fault?" Clara's voice rose. "You ruined yourself with your gambling and your lies." "Shut up!" The shout echoed across the terrace, through the open doors into the ballroom. Clara heard gasps, heard the music stutter and stop. "You stand there in your expensive dress with your duke protecting you, and you act like you're innocent, like you didn't drive me away with your demands and your expectations and your constant need to be perfect. That's enough." Adrian stepped between them, his voice deadly quiet. "You're drunk or mad or both. Leave before you make this worse." "Worse?" Thomas laughed, the sound jagged. "How could it be worse? She's destroyed everything, turned the whole city against me. And for what? Because I made one mistake?" "One mistake?" Clara pushed past Adrian, past reason, past caution. "You left me at the altar. You gambled away fortunes you didn't have. You tried to marry me for money and ran when you couldn't get it. You vandalized my property. You've been threatening me for weeks. Those aren't mistakes, Thomas. That's who you are." His hand moved so fast she almost didn't see it, almost didn't register that he'd grabbed her wrist until his fingers were digging into her skin hard enough to bruise. "You're coming with me. We're going to settle this." Adrian's fist connected with Thomas's jaw before Clara could react. The crack of bone on bone was sharp, final. Thomas stumbled backward, releasing her wrist, and for a moment everything hung suspended. The crowd gathered in the doorway, Clara's racing heart, Thomas's shocked expression. Then Thomas lunged, not at Adrian, at Clara. She saw his hand go to his coat pocket, saw the flash of metal, understood with crystal clarity that he'd brought a pistol to this ball, that whatever thin thread had been holding him together had finally snapped, that he was going to... Adrian shoved her sideways. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space of the terrace. Clara hit the ground hard, her dress tearing, her head cracking against stone. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard screaming, heard running footsteps, heard Adrian's voice shouting something she couldn't understand. She rolled onto her side, vision swimming, and saw Thomas Crawford standing with the pistol still raised, his face twisted into something unrecognizable. Saw Adrian on the ground between them, blood spreading across his white shirt in a bloom of scarlet. And she understood finally that this had never been about love or money or reputation. It had been about control, about a man who couldn't accept that a woman had rejected him, who would rather destroy everything than admit he was wrong. The world tilted. Clara tried to stand, couldn't, tried to reach Adrian, couldn't move fast enough. Someone was screaming, maybe her, maybe someone else. She couldn't tell anymore. Thomas looked at the gun in his hand like he didn't recognize it, looked at Adrian bleeding on the terrace, looked at Clara with an expression that might have been regret or might have been nothing at all. Then he ran. Clara's hands were covered in blood. She knelt on the terrace stones with Adrian's head in her lap, pressing her torn skirt against the wound in his shoulder while someone, Lord Pemberton maybe, or one of his footmen, shouted for a doctor. The world had narrowed to this, the warm slickness of blood seeping through silk, Adrian's face gone gray, his breathing shallow and wrong. "Stay with me." Her voice didn't sound like hers. "Adrian, stay with me." His eyes opened, unfocused. "Crawford." "Gone. Don't talk. Save your strength." "You're..." He coughed, winced. "You're all right?" "I'm fine. He missed me." "You..." Her throat closed. "You pushed me out of the way." Seemed like the thing to do. "You idiot." Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and fast. "You absolute idiot." "Been called worse." His hand found hers, gripped weakly. "Clara, listen. Whatever happens, don't let this break you. Nothing's going to happen. The doctor's coming. You're going to be fine." But she didn't know that. Didn't know if the bullet had hit bone or artery or something vital. Didn't know if Adrian would still be breathing in 5 minutes or 5 hours. The doctor arrived, an older man with steady hands and a grim expression. He took one look at Adrian and started barking orders. Clear the terrace, bring hot water, bandages, brandy, move. They carried Adrian inside to one of Pemberton's guest rooms. Clara tried to follow, but her father caught her arm, held her back. Let the doctor work. You need to let him do his job. Her father's face was ashen. And you need to tell the magistrate what happened. The magistrate. Right. Because Thomas Crawford had just shot a duke in front of 100 witnesses and then fled into the night like the coward he'd always been. The next hours blurred together.
Clara sat in Pemberton's study with a blanket around her shoulders. Someone had draped it there, she didn't remember who, and told the story 3 times to 3 different men in various positions of authority. The magistrate. The constable. A detective from Scotland Yard who arrived around midnight looking grim and determined. He'll run, the detective said. His name was Inspector Morris, and he had the kind of face that had seen too much and believed too little. Men like Crawford always run, probably heading for Dover, trying to get across to France before we can catch him. He already ran once, Clara said. Her voice was flat, empty. 6 weeks ago. Left me at the altar and disappeared. I know. I read the papers. Morris pulled out a notebook, started writing. This time he won't get far. We've got witnesses, we've got motive, and we've got every constable between here and the coast looking for him. He paused. The Duke. How is he? I don't know. They won't let me see him.
He saved your life. I know. Morris studied her for a long moment. Crawford's been watching you, following you. We've had reports from shopkeepers, servants, people who saw him lurking around your house at odd hours. He was obsessed. I didn't know it was that bad. Most people don't, until it's too late. He closed the notebook. You'll need to testify when we catch him. Can you do that? Yes. Good, because men like Crawford, they're good at talking their way out of things, making excuses, playing victim. We'll need you to be strong. Clara laughed, the sound bitter. Everyone keeps telling me to be strong, like I have a choice. You do have a choice, Miss Whitmore. You can crumble or you can fight. From what I've seen, you're not much for crumbling. He left. Clara sat alone in the study listening to the house settle, to the murmur of voices from other rooms, to the clock on the mantel ticking away seconds that felt like hours. Somewhere above her, Adrian was fighting for his life. Somewhere out there, Thomas was running. And she was here, covered in blood that wasn't hers, waiting for someone to tell her what happened next. Lady Catherine found her just before dawn. He's going to live. The words came out blunt, factual. The bullet went through his shoulder, missed everything vital. He's lost blood and he'll need weeks to recover, but he's going to live. Clara's breath left her in a rush. Can I see him? He's sleeping. The doctor gave him laudanum for the pain. Lady Catherine sat beside her, took her hand. Clara, what you did tonight, staying with him, keeping pressure on the wound until the doctor arrived, you saved his life. He saved mine first. Yes, he did. Lady Catherine's grip tightened, and now every person who was at that ball knows exactly what kind of man Thomas Crawford is, knows what kind of woman you are too. What kind is that? The kind who doesn't break. The kind who faces down a man with a gun and lives to tell about it. She pulled Clara to her feet. Come on, let's get you home. You can come back tomorrow when he's awake. The carriage ride back through a London slowly waking to morning light felt unreal. Clara stared out the window at milkmaids and street sweepers and delivery boys going about their ordinary lives, and she thought about how quickly everything could change. How one moment you could be dancing at a ball, and the next you could be kneeling in blood wondering if someone you cared about was going to die. She cared about Adrian. The realization settled over her like a weight. Somewhere between the fake courtship and the real conversations, between the strategic partnership and the genuine friendship, she'd started caring. Maybe more than caring, maybe... No, she couldn't think about that now. Not with everything else happening. The house was quiet when she arrived. Margaret helped her out of the ruined dress. It would never come clean. The blood had set too deep. And into a bath that turned pink with diluted crimson. Clara sat in the cooling water and tried not to think about the sound the gunshot had made. The way Adrian had fallen. The expression on Thomas's face right before he ran. She slept badly, dreaming of churches and altars and men who disappeared when you needed them most. Woke to Margaret shaking her shoulder and pale morning light streaming through the curtains. "Miss, the papers." Clara sat up, took the stack Margaret offered. The headline screamed in bold type. "Duke shot at Pemberton Ball. Crawford heir sought for attempted murder, abandoned bride witnesses. Violent attack. Duke of Ashford. Fights for life. Love triangle ends in bloodshed. Society reels from shocking violence." The stories varied in accuracy but agreed on the essentials. Thomas Crawford had shot the Duke of Ashford in front of witnesses and fled.
Clara Whitmore had stayed with the wounded Duke, possibly saving his life. The whole affair was scandalous, shocking, unprecedented. But the tone was different now. Where before the papers had treated Clara as a joke or a cautionary tale, now they treated her as a victim of a violent, unstable man. Where before they'd questioned her character, now they questioned Thomas's sanity. The narrative had shifted. "They're calling him a monster," Margaret said quietly, "saying he was always troubled, always dangerous, that people should have seen the signs. They did see the signs, they just didn't care until he shot someone important." Clara dressed carefully. Nothing too fine, nothing that looked like celebration. Dark green, simple, appropriate for visiting an injured man. She ate breakfast mechanically, her father watching her from across the table with worried eyes. "Are you sure you want to go back there? You could send a note, wait a few days." "I need to see him." "See,
Clara, I need to see that he's alive, that he's really going to be all right. I need—" Her voice cracked. "I need him to know I'm grateful." Her father didn't argue further. Pemberton's estate looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less intimidating. Clara was shown to the guest room where Adrian lay propped against pillows, looking pale but awake. His shoulder was bandaged, his arm in a sling, his face drawn with pain despite the laudanum. "You look terrible," Clara said from the doorway. "So do you." But he smiled, the expression weak but genuine. "Come in. Close the door. I'm tired of people hovering." She did, moving to sit in the chair beside his bed. Up close she could see the fever flush on his cheeks, the tight lines around his mouth. He'd been shot. Because of her, because he'd stepped between her and a bullet. "Thank you," she said quietly, for what you did. "You already thanked me. On the terrace. Called me an idiot, if I remember correctly." "You are an idiot. You could have been killed. So could you. I've been shot before. Hunting accident when I was 20. Knew I'd probably survive. You wouldn't have." His good hand found hers. "Don't ask me to regret saving your life, Clara. I won't. I'm not asking you to regret it. I'm asking you to understand that—" She stopped, trying to find words for something she didn't fully understand herself. "That it matters. That you matter. So do you. That's why I did it." They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked, the morning light painting patterns on the floor. Finally, Adrian spoke again, his voice rough. "They'll find him. Crawford. He can't hide forever." "I know. And when they do, you'll have to face him again. In court, testifying." "I know that too. Will you be able to do it?" Clara thought about Thomas's face right before he pulled the trigger. The desperation, the rage, the complete absence of the man she'd thought she loved. "Yes, I'll be able to do it." "Able? Good." Adrian's eyes were drifting closed despite his obvious effort to stay awake. "Because I'll be there, standing beside you every step. You need to recover first. I'm a fast healer." His words were slurring now, the laudanum pulling him under. "Clara?" "Yes?" "I meant what I said, about the courtship, about wanting, about you being—" He fought against the drug dragging him down. "This isn't fake anymore, not for me." Her heart stuttered. "Adrian." But he was asleep, his breathing evening out, his face relaxing into something almost peaceful. Clara sat with him for another hour, watching him sleep, trying to process what he'd just said, what it meant, what she felt about it. The truth was complicated. She'd started this arrangement strategically, a partnership designed to rebuild her reputation and give her protection. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else, something real,
Adrian saw her, not the perfect society lady she'd tried to be, not the scandal she'd become, but the actual person underneath, sharp and flawed and angry and brave. And he seemed to like what he saw. She liked what she saw too, his honesty, his intelligence, the way he refused to perform for anyone, the way he'd stepped in front of a bullet without hesitation. But was that enough to build something on? Or was she just grateful, traumatized, grasping for stability in the wake of chaos? She didn't know, couldn't trust her own judgment anymore when it came to men and love and futures that might or might not exist. The news came 3 days later. They'd found Thomas Crawford trying to board a ship in Dover. He'd fought when they arrested him, of course he had, and earned himself a black eye and split lip for his trouble. He was currently being held in London, awaiting trial for attempted murder. Clara received the news in her father's study, Inspector Morris delivering it with his usual grim efficiency. The trial will be in 6 weeks, gives the Duke time to recover enough to testify. Morris pulled out his notebook. Crawford's hired a lawyer, good one too. They're going to argue temporary insanity brought on by heartbreak and betrayal. What? Clara's voice went sharp. He tried to kill us and they're going to claim it was my fault? They're going to claim you drove him to it, that your rejection, your public humiliation of him, your flaunting of a new relationship pushed him past the breaking point. Morris's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry, Miss Whitmore. It's a common defense in cases like this. Cases like this? You mean where men try to murder women who reject them? Yes. Clara felt sick. Will it work? Will people believe it? Some will. There's always people willing to excuse violence if they can find a way to blame the victim. He paused. But we have witnesses, we have evidence. We have the fact that he brought a loaded pistol to a ball with clear premeditation. And we have you. Me. You can tell the court what really happened, what he did, how he behaved, the threats, the vandalism, the obsession. Your testimony will matter, Miss Whitmore, possibly more than anything else. After Morris left, Clara stood at the window watching rain begin to fall on the London streets below. 6 weeks until she'd have to stand in a courtroom and tell the world exactly what Thomas Crawford had done. 6 weeks until she'd have to face him again, this time without the chaos and fear to shield her. She was terrified. But underneath the fear was something else, something hard and bright and burning. Anger. At Thomas for what he'd done, at the lawyer who would try to twist it into her fault, at a system that would even entertain the idea that she'd driven him to violence. She wouldn't hide from this. Wouldn't let them paint her as the villain in a story where she'd nearly died. She'd tell the truth. All of it. And she'd do it in a way that left no doubt about who was really to blame. Adrian was released from Pemberton's estate a week after the shooting, moving back to his own London house with strict orders to rest and avoid exertion. Clara visited daily, bringing books and newspapers and conversation that distracted from pain and boredom. You don't have to keep coming, he said one afternoon when she arrived to find him trying to read with his arm still in a sling. I'm not dying. I know, I come because I want to. Why? Clara set down the books she'd brought, a history of India he'd mentioned wanting to read, a novel Lady Catherine had recommended. Because you're my friend. Because you took a bullet for me. Because... She stopped. Because what? Because I like you. Is that so hard to believe? Yes. But he was smiling. I'm difficult, abrasive, bad at small talk. Not exactly charming. No, you're not charming. You're honest. It's better. They talked for hours that afternoon about everything and nothing. About Adrian's time in India, about Clara's mother who died when she was 16, about the absurdity of society's rules and the weight of expectations neither of them had asked for. What do you want? Adrian asked as the afternoon light faded to gold. If you could have anything, build any life, what would it look like? Clara thought about it. I want to matter, not because of my father's money or my potential husband's title. I want to do something that's mine, something real. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. She looked at him. What about you? I want a partner, someone who sees me as an equal, who challenges me, who doesn't need me to be something I'm not. His gray eyes held hers. Someone like you. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Clara's heart was racing. Adrian, You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that this is real for me, that I'm not playing games or being strategic. He stopped, seemed to gather courage. I care about you, Clara. More than I expected to. More than is probably wise given the circumstances. The circumstances being that we started this as a performance, and that you're about to testify against a man who tried to kill us both, and that your life is complicated enough without adding me to it. He smiled ruefully. I have excellent timing. Clara moved to sit beside him on the sofa, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. Your timing is terrible, but... She took a breath. I care about you too. I don't know what that means yet. Don't know if I can trust it, or if this is just gratitude or trauma, or it doesn't have to be anything right now. We have time. Do we? The trial is in 5 weeks. After that, she didn't finish the sentence because she didn't know how it ended. Would they still be together? Would the scandal have destroyed what they'd built? Would she be able to move forward, or would she be forever defined by what Thomas Crawford had done? After that, Adrian said firmly, you'll have told your truth, and whatever happens, we'll handle it. Together. The words settled something in Clara's chest. Together. Not alone. Not hiding. Not performing. Together. The weeks before the trial passed in a strange haze of preparation and anxiety. Clara met with Morris repeatedly, going over her testimony, practicing how to stay calm under hostile questioning. Adrian recovered slowly, his arm healing but still weak, his face regaining color but retaining new lines that hadn't been there before. And the city talked, endlessly, about the shooting, about Clara, about Thomas Crawford and what had driven him to violence. The narrative shifted daily, depending on who was telling the story. Some days Clara was a brave woman standing up to an obsessed madman. Other days she was a heartless shrew who'd pushed a good man too far. It was exhausting, maddening. Clara stopped reading the papers, stopped listening to gossip, stopped caring what anyone thought beyond the people whose opinions actually mattered. Lady Catherine became a frequent visitor, offering advice and support that came from decades of navigating society's treacherous waters. They'll try to destroy you in that courtroom, she said bluntly one afternoon over tea. Crawford's lawyer will paint you as everything wrong with modern women. Ambitious, cold, unfeminine. You need to be ready for it. I am ready. Are you? Because it's one thing to face down gossip at a ball. It's another to stand in front of a judge and jury and have a man systematically try to prove you drove someone to attempted murder. Clara set down her teacup with a sharp click. What do you want me to do, Lady Catherine? Break down? Apologize? Admit I should have been more understanding when he abandoned me at the altar? I want you to be prepared, to understand that telling the truth isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to make people want to believe your truth over the lies. How? By being exactly who you are. Strong but not harsh. Honest but not cruel. A woman who survived something terrible and refused to let it break her. Lady Catherine leaned forward. Show them the woman I see, the one your mother would have been proud of. The words landed like a blow, unexpected and sharp. Clara blinked back sudden tears. I hope she would have been. I'm not sure anymore. I am. Your mother faced down scandal too, you know, different kind, different era, but the same essential test, and she survived it by refusing to apologize for being strong. Lady Catherine's hand covered Clara's. You come from steel, girl. Don't forget it. The night before the trial, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the altar to the gunshot, trying to find the words that would make the jury understand, trying not to be terrified. A soft knock on her door. Her father's voice. Clara, can I come in? Yes. He entered carrying a small wooden box, sat on the edge of her bed like he used to when she was a child and couldn't sleep. Your mother wanted you to have this. She made me promise to give it to you when you needed it most. He opened the box, pulled out a letter in her mother's handwriting. I think now qualifies. Clara took the letter with shaking hands, unfolded the pages. My dearest Clara, if your father is giving you this, it means you're facing something difficult, something that requires courage you're not sure you have. I wish I could be there to hold your hand and tell you that everything will be all right, but since I can't, I'll tell you this instead. You are stronger than you know. braver than you believe, and worth more than anyone's opinion of you, including your own. Life will test you. People will hurt you. Some of them will do it deliberately, others accidentally, but the pain is real either way. And when that happens, you'll have a choice. You can make yourself smaller to avoid future hurt, or you can stand tall and trust that you can survive whatever comes next. I hope you choose to stand tall. I hope you choose to be the woman I see when I look at you, brilliant, fierce, unbreakable. The woman who doesn't need permission to exist exactly as she is. Whatever you're facing, whatever trial you're enduring, know this: you are my daughter, and I raised you to be steel wrapped in silk. Show them the silk when it serves you, but never forget the steel underneath. I love you, always. Mother Clara read it twice, tears streaming down her face, feeling her mother's presence like a physical thing in the room. She knew, Clara whispered. Somehow she knew I'd need this. She knew you'd need reminding that you come from strength, that you don't face the world alone. Her father's voice was rough. You have her courage, Clara, and you have me, and Adrian, and everyone else who's seen what you're really made of. What if it's not enough? Then we try again, but I don't think it will come to that. I think you're about to show London exactly who Clara Whitmore is, and I think they're going to remember it for a very long time. The next morning dawned clear and cold, autumn finally asserting itself over the last remnants of summer. Clara dressed in deep blue, not the midnight shade she'd worn as armor, but something softer that still had steel in it. She pinned her mother's brooch at her throat, a small anchor of silver and pearls. Took a breath. Another. Descended the stairs to where her father waited. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The courthouse was already packed when they arrived. People crammed into the gallery to watch the spectacle. Clara walked through them with her head high and her father's arm steady under her hand. Found Adrian waiting near the front, his arm still in a sling, but his eyes sharp and focused. You look terrified, he said quietly. I am terrified. Good. Use it. Channel it. Make them see what it cost you to be here. The trial began. Thomas Crawford was brought in wearing expensive clothes that couldn't hide how he'd deteriorated. Thinner, paler, desperate in a way that would have made Clara pity him if she didn't know what he'd done. He didn't look at her, kept his eyes forward while his lawyer stood and painted a picture of a man driven mad by love and betrayal. Then it was Clara's turn. She walked to the witness box on legs that threatened to give out, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Looked out at the courtroom full of faces watching her with everything from sympathy to skepticism to barely concealed hostility. The prosecutor went first, asking her to describe what happened. Clara told it simply, chronologically, leaving out emotion but not fact. The abandonment at the altar, the letters from Crawford's secretary revealing the truth, the confrontation at the ball, the escalation, the threats, the gunshot. Then came Crawford's lawyer, a smooth man in expensive robes who smiled like he was doing her a favor. Miss Whitmore, you claim my client abandoned you at the altar, but isn't it true that you had been difficult during your engagement, demanding, perhaps giving him reason to question the marriage? No. No? You never argued? Never made unreasonable requests? We disagreed sometimes, like any couple, but I never did anything to justify him leaving me without explanation. And yet he left. A man who'd courted you for 3 years, who'd proposed marriage, who by all accounts seemed devoted. What do you think changed, Miss Whitmore? He realized he couldn't get my dowry without actually marrying me. The lawyer's smile thinned. That's quite an accusation. Based on what evidence? Based on the records his own secretary provided. Based on the debts he'd accrued. Based on the fact that he ran the moment he understood my father wouldn't release funds before the wedding. Or perhaps based on your wounded pride. Your desire to paint him as a villain rather than admit the marriage simply wasn't meant to be. Clara felt the trap closing but refused to step into it. I was wounded. I won't deny that. But my characterization of his actions is based on documented evidence, not emotion. Documented evidence that mysteriously appeared from a disgruntled former employee? How convenient. The questioning went on for hours, each question designed to paint Clara as bitter, vindictive, manipulative. But she held steady, answered clearly, refused to be provoked into the kind of emotional response that would prove their case. Finally, inevitably, they got to the shooting. You were on the terrace with the Duke of Ashford, alone, in the dark, at a ball. Some might call that inappropriate, Miss Whitmore. Some might. I call it a conversation. A conversation that my client interrupted, a conversation between his former fiancée and another man. One can understand how that might be upsetting. Being upset doesn't justify attempted murder. No one is justifying anything. We're simply trying to understand what drove a man of previously good character to such desperate action. The lawyer leaned forward. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, do you think your very public relationship with the Duke might have contributed to my client's distress? Clara looked at Thomas then, really looked at him. Saw him watching her with hollow eyes, waiting for her answer. My relationship with Adrian, with the Duke of Ashford, began after your client abandoned me, after he'd already spread rumors and made threats. I don't think it contributed to his distress. I think it took away his control. And men like Thomas Crawford can't stand losing control. Men like... That's quite a judgment. It's an observation based on experience. Clara's voice was steady now, clear. He couldn't control whether I hid in shame or held my head up. He couldn't control how society responded to the truth about his debts. He couldn't control my future or my choices. So he tried to control the only thing left, whether I lived or died. That's not distress. That's not heartbreak. That's violence. The courtroom went silent. No further questions, the lawyer said quietly. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Clara waited in an anteroom with Adrian and her father, pacing, unable to sit still, playing out every possible outcome in her mind. When they were finally called back, the courtroom was packed again. Clara stood between her father and Adrian, feeling both their hands find hers, feeling their strength flowing into her. The foreman stood. We find the defendant, Thomas Crawford, guilty of attempted murder. The room exploded into noise, shouts, gasps, the bang of the judge's gavel demanding order. Clara stood frozen, the word echoing in her head. Guilty. 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 Thomas was sentenced to 15 years. They led him away in chains, and he finally looked at Clara, his face a mask of rage, and something that might have been grief. She looked back, didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just watched him disappear. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was massive. Reporters, onlookers, people Clara didn't know but who seemed to have opinions anyway. They surged forward as she emerged, shouting questions, demanding statements. Miss Whitmore, how does it feel? Will you marry the Duke? Do you think justice was... Adrian stepped in front of her, his voice cutting through the chaos. Miss Whitmore has no comment at this time. Please respect her privacy. They pushed through to the carriage, Clara's father clearing a path, Adrian's hand steady on her back. The moment the door closed, shutting out the noise, Clara started shaking. It's over, her father said. It's finally over. Is it? Clara looked between them. Or is this just another scandal, another story for them to twist? Let them twist it, Adrian said. You told the truth. The jury believed you. Crawford is going to prison. That's victory, Clara. Take it. She wanted to feel triumphant or vindicated or at least relieved, but mostly she just felt exhausted, wrung out, like she'd been fighting for so long she'd forgotten how to stop. Take me home, she said quietly. But as the carriage rolled through London streets, Clara looked out the window and saw something she hadn't expected. People watching her pass with something that looked like respect, like admiration, like they were seeing her clearly for the first time. She'd survived abandonment, scandal, and attempted murder. She'd stood in a courtroom and told her truth despite everything arrayed against her. She'd refused to break, refused to hide, refused to be anything less than exactly who she was. And London was noticing. For the first time since that terrible day at the altar, Clara thought maybe, just maybe, she'd won. The victory felt hollow at first. Clara spent the 3 days after the trial in her father's house, declining visitors, ignoring the stack of invitations that began arriving the moment the verdict was announced. People who'd crossed the street to avoid her 6 months ago now wanted to express their support, their admiration, their desire to be associated with the woman who'd brought down Thomas Crawford. Vultures, Margaret muttered, sorting through calling cards from women who'd cut Clara dead at balls. Every last one of them. They're just doing what society does, following the new narrative. Clara didn't even look up from the book she wasn't reading. Yesterday I was a scandal. Today I'm a survivor. Tomorrow I'll be something else entirely. You don't sound like someone who just won, don't I? Clara set down the book. What exactly did I win, Meg? Crawford's in prison, yes, but I'm still the abandoned bride. Still the woman who got shot at. Still defined by what a man did to me rather than anything I've done myself. Margaret's face softened. That's not how people are talking about you now, miss. How are they talking about me? Like you're brave. Like you're strong. Like you're someone to be reckoned with. Margaret held up one of the calling cards. Lady Pemberton wants to host a dinner in your honor. Lady Hartwell, the same woman who was spreading gossip about you, she's written a formal apology, and this one, she pulled out an envelope with an official seal. This one's from the Queen's secretary. That got Clara's attention. What? It's an invitation to a reception at the palace for women of notable courage and character. Margaret was grinning now. You're being invited to meet the Queen, Miss Clara. The absurdity of it hit Clara all at once. 3 months ago, she'd been humiliated at the altar. 2 months ago, she'd been a social pariah. 1 month ago, she'd nearly been murdered. And now the Queen wanted to meet her. She started laughing. Couldn't stop. Laughed until tears streamed down her face and Margaret looked worried, and the hollowness in her chest finally began to crack open into something that might eventually feel like triumph. I need to see Adrian, she said when she could breathe again. He's been asking after you, miss. Sends a note every day. I know, I haven't been ready. Clara stood, moved to the window. Outside, London continued its endless churn, carriages and pedestrians and vendors calling their wares. The city that had judged her, pitied her, and finally begun to respect her. But I'm ready now. She arrived at Adrian's house that afternoon without sending word ahead, letting the butler announce her in a way that suggested she had every right to be there. Adrian was in his study, his arm still in a sling but looking stronger than the last time she'd seen him. He stood when she entered, his face cycling through surprise, relief, and something warmer. Clara, I was beginning to think you'd disappeared. I was thinking, processing, trying to figure out what happens now. And did you figure it out? Not entirely, but I figured out part of it. She closed the distance between them, close enough to see the healing scar on his jaw from where he'd hit the terrace stones. I figured out that I don't want to be alone anymore, that I'm tired of protecting myself by keeping everyone at arm's length, She stopped, gathered courage. That what I said before the trial was true. I care about you. And I'm tired of pretending that's strategic or temporary or anything except what it is. Adrian's good hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Which is? Real, complicated, terrifying. She covered his hand with hers. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Don't know if I can trust my own judgment about men and love and futures, but I know I want to try, with you. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to try. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers. I'm not Thomas Crawford, Clara. I won't run when things get difficult. I won't lie to you or manipulate you or make you doubt yourself. I'll argue with you and challenge you and probably drive you mad sometimes, but I won't betray you. How can you promise that? Because I know what it cost you to trust again, and I'd cut off my own arm before I made you regret it. Clara kissed him then, soft and careful and full of all the things she couldn't say yet. He kissed her back like she was precious, like she was worth the bullet he'd taken, like she was exactly what he'd been looking for without knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Adrian smiled. So, what happens now? Now I stop hiding, stop letting fear dictate my choices, stop being defined by scandal and start building something that's mine. She pulled back slightly, needing space to think. I've been offered money, from publishers. They want me to write about what happened, tell the whole story from my perspective. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me wants to control the narrative for once instead of letting others tell it for me. But another part thinks, what's the point? The trial is over. Crawford's in prison. Why relive it? Because other women are going through similar things right now. Being abandoned, being threatened, being told their pain doesn't matter as much as preserving a man's reputation. Adrian's voice was steady. Your story could help them, could give them permission to fight back. Or it could just be more scandal for people to consume, more entertainment. Then make sure it's not. Make sure you tell it in a way that serves you, not them. Clara thought about that, about taking all the pain and fear and rage she'd felt and transforming it into something useful, something that might actually matter beyond gossip and spectacle. I'll think about it, she said finally. The Queen's reception was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Clara spent the intervening time in a strange limbo. Not quite scandal, not quite respectable, but something in between that nobody seemed to know how to categorize. Some of the old guard still snubbed her, but younger women began seeking her out, asking quietly about what happened, about how she'd found the courage to testify, about whether things would ever go back to normal. I don't think they will, Clara told one earnest girl at Lady Catherine's weekly salon. But maybe normal wasn't worth going back to anyway. Lady Catherine overheard, smiled approvingly. You're learning. What am I learning? That normal is overrated. That the women who change things are the ones willing to be uncomfortable, to be talked about, to be something other than what society expects. She sipped her tea. Your mother knew that. It's why she was so beloved and so scandalous at the same time. I never knew my mother was scandalous. Oh, she was magnificent, spoke her mind, defied your grandfather's wishes about who she should marry, insisted on having opinions about politics and business. Society didn't know what to do with her, still doesn't know what to do with you. Lady Catherine set down her cup. That's a compliment, by the way. The palace reception was smaller than Clara expected. Perhaps 50 women in a grand room that could have held hundreds. The Queen was elderly now, moving carefully but with her mind still sharp as a blade. She greeted each woman personally, and when she reached Clara, her eyes were assessing. Miss Whitmore, I've been reading about your ordeal. Your Majesty, Clara curtsied, kept her head down. Look at me, child. Clara looked up, met the Queen's gaze. Better. I don't like women who can't meet my eyes, suggest they're ashamed of something. The Queen studied her. Are you ashamed? No, Your Majesty. Good. You've nothing to be ashamed of. A man betrayed you, threatened you, tried to kill you. You survived and sent him to prison. That's not scandal. That's strength. She paused. What will you do now? The question caught Clara off guard. I'm not certain yet, Your Majesty. Then get certain. Women like us, we don't have the luxury of uncertainty. The world is watching, waiting to see if we'll crumble or rise. Show them rising. The Queen's hand patted Clara's briefly. You have my support. Use it wisely. She moved on to the next woman, leaving Clara slightly dazed. The Queen's support. That meant something in society's intricate web of favor and influence. Meant doors would open that had been closed. Meant people would think twice before cutting her. Meant she had power now, real power. The question was what to do with it. The answer came 2 weeks later, in the form of a letter from a women's charity her mother had supported. They were looking for someone to head their efforts to help women escaping violent situations, providing shelter, legal advice, protection from men who wouldn't accept rejection. Clara read the letter 3 times, feeling something shift in her chest. This was what she could do with everything she'd survived. Turn her pain into purpose, her experience into advocacy, her story into a weapon that protected instead of wounded. She accepted the position the next day. You're sure about this? Her father asked when she told him. It's not exactly traditional for a woman of your station. Since when have I been traditional? Point taken. But he smiled. Your mother would have loved this. She always said the best use of privilege was lifting up people who didn't have it. Then I'm doing it for her too. The work was harder than Clara expected and more rewarding than she could have imagined. She met women whose stories made her own seem almost gentle. Women beaten, stalked, whose children were used against them, who had nowhere to go and no one to believe them. She helped secure housing, navigate legal systems, find employment. She testified before Parliament about the need for better protections, better laws, better resources. And slowly, painfully, she watched her reputation transform again. Not the abandoned bride anymore. Not even the woman who'd survived attempted murder. But Clara Whitmore, advocate, reformer, someone who mattered for what she did, not what had been done to her. Adrian supported her throughout, attending fundraisers, using his political connections to open doors, standing beside her when she gave speeches that made conservative members of parliament sputter with indignation. "You're going to make enemies," he warned after one particularly inflammatory address about men's legal rights to abuse their wives. "I already have enemies. At least now they hate me for something I actually said." 6 months after the trial, Adrian proposed. Not at a ball or in a garden or any of the traditional romantic settings. In Clara's new office at the charity headquarters, surrounded by paperwork and case files and the chaos of trying to help too many people with too few resources. "Marry me," he said, standing in the doorway with his arm finally free of the sling, his expression serious. Clara looked up from the letter she was writing. "What?" "Marry me. Be my wife, my partner, my equal in all the ways that matter." He crossed to her desk, knelt beside her chair. "I'm not asking you to give up your work or your independence or any part of yourself. I'm asking you to share your life with someone who sees exactly who you are and wants all of it. Adrian, I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been since you faced down Thomas Crawford at that first ball and refused to apologize for existing. Maybe before that. I don't know. But I know I want to spend the rest of my life watching you change the world and arguing with you about politics and supporting whatever mad scheme you come up with next." He pulled out a ring, simple gold, no ostentation. "So marry me. Please." Clara's hands were shaking. "I'm difficult. I know. I'm damaged, still working through what Thomas did, probably will be for years. I know that too. I'm going to keep doing this work, keep fighting, keep making enemies. I'm counting on it." His eyes held hers. "Clara, I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real. And you're the most real person I've ever met. So yes or no?" She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, the one who believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who thought love meant safety and marriage meant protection. That woman was gone, burned away in the fire of scandal and survival. But maybe that was all right. Maybe the woman she was now, scarred and stronger and still figuring things out, maybe this woman could build something better than a fairy tale, something honest, something that didn't require her to be anything except exactly who she was. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was nothing like the one that never happened. Clara wore cream instead of white. A deliberate choice, a statement that she wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. The ceremony was small, held in Lady Catherine's private chapel, with only people who actually mattered in attendance. No 300 aristocrats, no social obligations, no performances. Just her father giving her away with tears in his eyes. Just Margaret sobbing in the front row. Just Lady Catherine officiating with the special license she'd somehow procured. Just Adrian waiting at the altar with a smile that said he knew exactly what this cost her, and chose it anyway. Clara walked down the aisle, and this time the man waiting didn't disappear. He took her hand, held it steady through the vows, kissed her when the moment came like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. And when they turned to face the small gathering of people who'd supported her through everything, Clara felt something she hadn't felt since before Thomas Crawford had destroyed her first wedding. Peace. The reception was held at Adrian's house. Their house now, she supposed, though that would take getting used to. Small and intimate, good food and better wine and conversation that ranged from ridiculous to profound and back again. "So what now?" Lady Catherine asked, cornering Clara in the library while Adrian was giving a toast in the other room. "You've survived scandal, sent your attacker to prison, married a duke, and started changing laws. What's left?" "Everything," Clara said. "There's so much work to do, so many women who need help, so many laws that need changing, so many men who think they own women's lives and need to be proven wrong. You're going to be exhausted. Probably. But I'm going to be doing something that matters, something mine, something that turns all the pain into purpose." Clara looked at the older woman who'd been her mother's best friend, her own guide through society's maze. "Is that enough? To build a life on?" "My dear girl, That's everything. Lady Catherine's eyes were bright. Your mother would be so proud. I hope you know that. I hope so too. Adrian found her later, after the guests had left and the house had settled into quiet. She was standing on the terrace where she'd nearly died, looking out over London's nighttime sprawl. Memories? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Just thinking about how much has changed, how different this is from what I thought I wanted a year ago. Better or worse? Different. Harder in some ways, better in others. She leaned into him, felt his arm come around her waist. I thought love was supposed to make things easy, make you feel safe, make the world softer. And now? Now I think love is choosing someone who makes you want to be braver, who stands beside you in the hard moments instead of trying to shield you from them, who sees your scars and doesn't flinch. She turned to face him. Thank you for not flinching. Thank you for letting me stand beside you. I know that wasn't easy. They stayed there for a long time, watching the city lights, talking about plans and dreams and the work still ahead, about the life they'd build together. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Months turned into years. Clara's charity grew, helping hundreds of women escape dangerous situations. She published a book about her experience, not a scandal memoir, but a serious analysis of women's legal vulnerabilities and the systems that protected abusers. It was controversial, banned in some circles, celebrated in others. She didn't care. It started conversations that needed to happen. Adrian used his position in Parliament to push for reforms, laws that gave women more rights in marriage, that protected them from violence, that treated them as people instead of property. They didn't win every battle, lost more than they won, some years. But they kept fighting, and slowly, incrementally, things changed. Clara became someone young women looked up to, not because she was perfect or because her life had worked out like a fairy tale, but because she'd survived something terrible and refused to let it define her, because she'd taken her pain and transformed it into something that helped others. The scandal of the abandoned bride faded into history, became a footnote in larger stories about women's rights and social reform. Clara preferred it that way. 5 years after the wedding, Clara stood before Parliament giving testimony about proposed legislation to criminalize marital rape. It was uncomfortable, radical, the kind of thing that made conservative members turn purple with rage. She didn't care. "Gentlemen," she said, looking out over the rows of powerful men who could change lives with their votes, "I stand before you as someone who nearly died because a man believed my rejection of him was a crime worthy of murder. I stand before you representing hundreds of women who've been beaten, violated, and terrorized by men who claim to love them. And I'm asking you, begging you, to recognize that marriage is not ownership, that women are people deserving of protection, not property to be used as men see fit." The room erupted into argument. Clara stood her ground, answered every hostile question with facts and calm reason, refused to be intimidated by men who thought her voice had no place in their chambers. The legislation passed by 3 votes. Adrian was waiting outside when the session ended, pride written all over his face. "You did it. We did it. Together." Clara took his hand. "Though I suspect we just made about 100 new enemies. Worth it." They walked through London together, this city that had judged her and broken her and finally, grudgingly, begun to respect her. Clara thought about the woman she'd been, the one who'd walked down the aisle toward a future that had shattered before it began. That woman had believed she needed a man to complete her story, to give her life meaning. She'd been wrong, but being wrong had led her here, to work that mattered, to a partnership built on honesty and mutual respect, to a life she'd chosen instead of one chosen for her. "Regrets?" Adrian asked, reading her expression. "About Crawford? About the scandal? About nearly dying? About any of it?" Clara thought about it honestly, about the humiliation and fear and rage she'd endured, about the woman she'd become because of it, harder, sharper, less willing to compromise herself for other people's comfort. "No," she said finally, "I wouldn't choose it again. But I wouldn't undo what it taught me, what it made me." Which is? Someone who knows her own worth, who doesn't need anyone's permission to exist exactly as she is, who takes the worst thing that ever happened to her and uses it to make sure other women don't have to suffer the same way. She squeezed his hand. That's worth everything it cost to get here. They walked home through the twilight, through a London that was changing, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Women on the streets walking with more confidence, laws being written that recognized their humanity, conversations happening that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Clara had been part of that change, had helped push society forward by refusing to accept the role it tried to force on her, by standing up and saying no, by surviving and thriving and showing others it was possible. The abandoned bride had become something far more dangerous, a woman who refused to stay abandoned, who'd risen from the ashes of her own humiliation and built something that mattered, who'd proven that being broken wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a different one. And that story, Clara thought, as she and Adrian climbed the steps to their home, was still being written, still full of possibilities, still hers to shape however she chose. She'd started as a woman waiting at the altar for a man who never came. She'd become a woman who didn't need anyone to come for her because she'd learned to save herself. And somewhere in between those two versions, she'd found something better than the fairy tale she'd been promised. She'd found a life built on truth instead of performance, partnership instead of dependency, purpose instead of perfection. It wasn't what she'd planned, but it was real. It was hers, and it was more than enough.